Hello, members and friends of Church of the Trinity and others who may see this video because it will probably be on social media. Every Tuesday, I share a reflection with our congregation. And so it is Tuesday, June 2nd, and I've been thinking this morning and praying about what my reflection would be today. I've decided to do it on video because I really need you to see my face and hear my voice, and I hope feel my heart this morning. I feel like there's some things that I must say, and in fact feel like that the lines have been drawn in the sand now. And there are moments in life where standing in the place where you should is important. So I want to start by saying that I want to thank two of my friends and colleagues. One, Reverend Presley Sutherland, who is an MCC pastor in Hawaii, and to my dear friend and family member, Reverend Candy Holmes, who lives here in Florida. I want to thank them for some words they have said this week. Reverend Presley said the other day in a Facebook post, as a reminder to us all, that sometimes there is a holy no that we should say, and sometimes there is a thing called righteous anger. It has caused me to let those words and phrases resonate in my own spirit over the last few days. The holy no and the righteous anger. Now, not self-righteous anger, but righteous anger. And then I have been stirring inside my own soul with the words of my friend Candy, who said on the steps of the St. Petersburg City Hall earlier this week, "Enough is enough, and enough has been enough for a very long time." I can feel the angst in those words when our Black brothers and sisters and siblings have repeatedly and over and over and over again said to us, enough is enough. They've said to us, please let Black lives matter. And what they have encountered over and over again is that for a few days, some of us will say enough is enough, and then we go on back to our white privilege, while they go on back to a life where maybe tomorrow after the protests are over, or the next week after the protests are over, they will still go back to the same dangerous, racist systems that have existed way too long. So enough is enough, and it's been enough for far too long. As I've reflected on this, I've had no choice really but to be reminded of the one who we follow, Jesus. And I've been reminded of the ways in which he said a holy no, and the ways in which he said righteous anger is sometimes important. I'll remind you of a couple of those stories today. One of them is when Jesus went into the temple, a fairly famous story about Jesus because we often mark it as a moment we got to see Jesus be angry. And what he did was he went into the temple. I turned my head because I'm so profoundly affected by this. And he started turning over the tables of people who were in the temple selling things. They were selling things for their own purposes. They were perhaps selling goods, but they were also perhaps selling ideas that were for their own purposes, not necessarily backed up by their own Jewish structure of religion and belief, but just backed out by their own greed and their own sense of power to claim the temple as a place for their own purposes. Jesus was very angry about this and said to them, "This shall be a house of prayer for all people." All people, not some people, not those that we deem are okay enough or important enough, but all people. This shall be a place of prayer for all people. And so this place has no room for this other kind of nonsense. And so Jesus went into the temple and said a holy no. A holy no. We saw him get angry, but it was a righteous anger because he was protecting the place where God lives, the temple where God lives. So yesterday we saw our president clear out peaceful protesters with tear gas and rubber bullets so he could walk through the crowd and stand in front of a Christian church, clumsily holding a Bible and saying nothing, saying no prayers, saying no words of compassion, but holding a Bible with a stern, angry look on his face right after he proclaimed that our governors should dominate with the military and that they're weak if they don't dominate with the military might. I think that this is much like the people in the temple who were selling goods and selling ideas that were for their own purposes. This was the same yesterday. And I really don't care whether it's the President of the United States or a business owner or a homeless person. Anyone who stands in front of a Christian church with our holy text and tries to make it something that Jesus never said was true should incense us all. It should cause in us a righteous anger, and we should stand up as Christians and say a holy no. And then most powerful of all, of course, is the story of Jesus who died as a criminal and like a criminal. He was arrested, get this, he was arrested by the state. And he was arrested by the state because he was saying things to people in power that they did not want to hear. Sound familiar? He was calling on the people in power, whether that was religious power or whether it was governmental power. He was calling on the people in power to notice the folks who were left behind, to notice the folks who were invisible during the time in which he lived. He was calling on people in power to no longer leave behind or ignore the atrocity that was happening to people they did not want to see and did not want to hear about. We follow a Christ who was very willing to say a holy no to that. He was so willing to say no. He was so willing to have righteous anger that he gave his own life for it. He did not retract his belief about it in order to escape death. He did not roll back his privilege as a Jewish man, as a Jewish rabbi. He did not roll back his own privilege and power to speak loudly and to never stop, even if it meant his own death. My friends, that is the reason I follow Jesus, because I want to follow the one who was willing to go to a horrible death for what he believed in, and that what he believed in was speaking truth to power and never letting up. That is the Christian I want to be today. And I believe what that means is that I have to be someone who will say a holy no. Sometimes I have to say that holy no to myself, because I will tell myself as a Christian pastor, I can't take sides. As a pastor, I can't get too political. Today I say to that a holy no. I do have to stand, because I have to stand with Jesus for starters. And then I also have to stand for the people that Jesus would have been standing with were he here today. Well, my friends, we're here today. We're here today to stand in his stead. We're here to stand in that place. And that place would be with the folks who have been left behind, who've been ignored, and whose lives don't seem to matter to the powers that be. I think we have to think seriously about being righteously angry. And I'll say this to myself too. Righteously angry. That there seems to be the willingness to use law and order to use military might and domination to keep people from rioting and protesting. But when it comes to making sure that we dominate the training and the expectations of our police officers, there's no there. So we can't have it both ways. Now, I don't want any of you to walk away from here today saying that I support violent protest or that I support the destruction of property or of human life. I don't. However, I don't believe that the people who are willing to perpetuate more violence are any less guilty than the people who are perpetuating looting and fires and other kinds of violence. So I want us to ask ourselves very clearly, how are we going to find our voice, use our white privilege? White folks, listen to me. Our white privilege is powerful. And so we need to either use it to heal or to harm. That's what's happening right now. White people are either using their privilege to harm or to heal. We get to choose, and we need to choose it today to be healers, and we need to choose it tomorrow to be healers. And when this is no longer in the news, and when it's no longer a big deal anymore, and when all of the rioting and protests are over and white people go home, it still needs to be our intention to use our white privilege every day to heal this country, and to heal this country of racism systemically, personally. And we need to use it to heal white supremacy. And until we can own that that is who we are, every time we use our white privilege, we perpetuate racism. I want to make a confession that I have way too many times shrunk back. I have way too many times not used my own voice and privilege to stand with my African American siblings. But I'm saying to you today that I will no longer do that ever. I am going to say that whenever, however, and as many times as possible, I will use my voice to say that humans matter, that the idea of humanity matters. It mattered to Jesus. It matters to the God that we serve. Humanity matters in all of its diversity, in all of its colors, in all of its hues, in all of the different ways that each of us come into this world and how we impact it. It matters. Our words matter. Our actions matter. You don't just get to go back and apologize every time you make a gaffe and then just go right out and do it again. We have to know that sometimes we own our mistakes, we own our foibles, we own our gaffes, and then we work really hard to never make that mistake again. As people who are white, we often think I'm sorry is enough. We often think that because we have a black friend, that's enough. We often think because we say we aren't racist, that that's enough. So let's start today with knowing that because we grew up white, there is some speck of racism in all of us. There is some moment in all of us where we do not stand up when we should, and where we know we don't have to because it won't affect our lives as white people. Justice, my friends, is not about fighting for the things that affect only you. Justice is about speaking for the folks who are having things happen to them, and we witness them, and we stand with them even if it has not been our experience or it hasn't happened to us. I'm getting close to having preached a sermon here, but I have one more thing I want to ask you to do. For all of those of you who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, I want to say to you that when we look at our black community, we need to see ourselves, whether we are white or other colors. We need to see ourselves. We need to remember that these kinds of things have happened to us before. And for us to look the other way or pretend it's not happening to us is a fallacy, and it is false. It is not the truth. The truth is, there was a time when we needed people to stand with us, and now it is our turn. So I invite you, I implore you, I am practically begging you to take a stand, use your voice. Make sure that as you call yourself a Christian, that you stand in the place where Jesus would have stood. I'll ask you to join me in saying the holy no, and in saying it is okay for me to have righteous anger and stand up for our Black community. Black Lives Matter. Following Jesus matters. Being people of compassion, being people who are for justice and mercy, that is our call. May it be so in our lives this day and in all the days to come. Amen.